Welcome to Avalara. We're here to help you tackle the complex and ever-changing world of sales tax compliance so you can focus on what you do best, running your business. Whether you're a growing family business or a large international manufacturer, we'll be with you every step of the way to help you manage your changing tax compliance needs as your business grows. We're excited to step into your corner and help your business thrive.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Understanding Exemption Certification Management. My name is Ashley, and I'm so excited to be your MC for today. Today, we are covering exemption management, what it is, and why it can be so difficult to manage. But before we dive in, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. Just a friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal advice, but we will answer your questions as best we can. So submit any questions you have using the Ask a Question box. Up next is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review this while I continue on with a few other housekeeping items. We are recording today's event. If you want to listen to it again or share it with a colleague, you'll receive the recording within the next 24 hours. The console you're looking at can be customized, so feel free to move the boxes around to make the most out of your desktop space. The additional resources section contains related resources, including today's slide deck. If there are any resources you'd like to check out, go ahead, click them, open them now. They'll open in a new tab. Make sure to do that now because the console will automatically close at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, please submit them using the Ask a Question box. We will answer as many questions as possible throughout the webcast and during the Q&A time at the end of the presentation. You can also submit any webinar troubleshooting questions you have there. Click the box at the bottom of your screen with the little chat bubbles to access the group chat. We encourage you all to introduce yourself, make connections with fellow Avalara customers. We'd love to know where everyone's tuning in from today. I'm calling in from Ames, Iowa. Go Cyclones. So drop in the chat where you're watching from today. If you have any technical issues, there's a question mark icon at the bottom. You can troubleshoot questions there, or you can reach out with the Ask a Question box. We are offering 1 CPE credit for today's presentation. For those looking to receive CPE credit today, please note that we will ask you to respond to 3 of our 4 poll questions. The poll questions will pop up on your screen, so please make sure you're ready to answer them when the question appears. You must also attend the full 50-minute duration. Please do not split or tile screens on your computer window, as this can affect the placement of the poll questions. Once you have met the CPE requirements, your certificate will be available for download in the Earn Certification box on your screen. Click the icon to access your certificate. It will open in a new window and be waiting there for you at the end. Your certificate will also be sent to you in a post-event email. Unfortunately, we are unable to provide CPE credit to those who have technology issues that prevent them from qualifying. Lastly, if you have a moment, please respond to the survey questions on your screen or following the webinar. So next, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today. We have Jeffrey Lutters, Senior Manager, Product Solution Engineering at Avalara. Jeffrey leads a team of product solution engineers in direct support of 30,000 Avalara customers. His team acts as both technical and tax subject matter experts, and he focuses on global compliance, retail, e-commerce, new technology deployments, document management, and much more for all of our customers. Before we turn things over, we do have our first poll question. So as a reminder, you need to respond to 3 of these 4 poll questions. if you are looking to earn CPE credit today. So the first question is, are you a CPA? So yes, with an active license, yes, inactive license, or no. So we'll give you a moment to answer that as I advance over to the agenda, and we'll hand things off to Jeffrey.
Thank you, Ashley. So I am calling in from Seattle, Washington, up near our corporate headquarters. And I got to mention, for it being like a winter day, the sun's actually out right now. So you'll see throughout this video, you may see a sun little patch show up in my face. My blinds are pulled, I swear. But hey, it's what happens. So why are we talking about exemption certificates? Well, actually, I was on site. We had a customer event that we did in London a month or two ago. And so I went through a very similar deck with that group. And there was also a lot of questions that came from it. And I think as a group, we decided it'd be worth doing a webinar to really dive through these things, especially as companies are thinking through, as we're kind of closing out our year, how do we clean things up? How do we set ourselves up for next year? And so this is a very relevant topic. And you'll hear this kind of throughout my presentation today, that there's just some things that are happening out there in the market that are affecting companies and how they have to look at, manage certificates. And the fact is, as with everything, it's just getting more complicated. So what are we talking about today? Well, obviously, we're going to start out with what is it? So make sure that we're all on the same page. We have folks joining this call from all over the world. So I do want to make sure that we're kind of clear on what we're talking about today. But then naturally, if it exists, why is it so hard? And why do companies have so many challenges kind of walking through this? We'll then pair that knowledge with how it aligns to a program called the SST, the Streamlined Sales Tax Initiative. And so I'll unpack that for a little bit. Then we'll think through, how does Avalara fit into this? And not only does how Avalara address these challenges, but how does that work seamlessly with AvaTax and also my ERPs, my point of sale systems, my CRMs, however you're using AvaTax today. Now, when we think about deploying it, there's a lot of benefits to your business. So we'll unpack some of those things, and then I'll bring you through some pieces of information around it. So it won't be a live demo as much as a showing you some natural screens that kind of exist within it. And then, of course, one with some Q&A. As with all of these sessions, the questions tend to just flood in. And so Ashley will mention it later, but we'll do our best to answer them at the end. But if we don't have an answer live on the webinar, we will certainly follow up directly from your account manager or other folks. And so please feel free to post those questions. If they're more general around this deck or more specific, we love to engage with you around that piece of it. So, okay, agenda, this is the boring part of the discussion. So let's move on from that. So when I think about what is exemption management, I think it's important for us to kind of start and thinking about I love this idea of an iceberg where you have part of it showing above the ocean, but there's so much going on below. So when we think about beyond tax calculation, kind of that real-time assessment of what tax applies for this invoice or for this order, what do we have to think about? So obviously, e-commerce, how you interact with your customers. We want to think about, now that you've collected tax, the returns around it. We want to think about customer satisfaction. We'll talk a lot about that today as well. And audit readiness, certainly making sure that we have the proper documentation and information for that. But those two bottom ones that I skipped over when I was talking about the slide, I think are really important for our discussion today. Obviously, exemption certificates, that'll be the main topic that we're walking through. But Nexus is really important, because I think when people think through about all the changes that have happened around economic nexus over the past couple of years, and that shift from it really being in the US, where you as a company have a physical presence, whether it's people, place, or things, to this shift about where your customers are. So when you are selling into a state, states are now looking at how much you sell, whether it's how much taxable items, taxable and non-taxable items, and they're looking at transaction counts. But we got to think through that as you expand Nexus in more and more states. And so you go from 2 states to 27 states. It's not just the sales tax calculation piece of it, but it is very much the exemption certificates. So maybe you've already been selling into these states and you already have organizations you're selling to that now you have to go back and get certificates for. Maybe you are now selling into new customers for the first time in a state and have to start collecting these certificates. And we'll talk a lot about this today, but these states can have 20, 30 different forms. So number one, knowing what form I should be getting, what needs to be on that form for me to accept that is a huge hurdle for companies. So when we think about tax calculation and kind of that real-time assessment about when you're figuring out on that invoice how to put tax on there, you're looking at kind of who, what, and where. Who am I invoicing? What am I invoicing for? And then where is that product or service being received? That who piece of it is critical to make sure that we've really understanding this certificate conversation and how we manage and maintain those pieces of it. So I think this is a really good foundation for as we talk through this, that it's not just exemption certificates for your current process, but very much with this new era of economic nexus and having to register in more states, it's not just the tax application, but it's very much the document management side of it. Okay, so now what is it? So when we think about applying tax, I just mentioned a moment ago, this idea of who, what, and where. So on an invoice or in an order or in a shopping cart, you have to quickly assess who is this customer, what am I selling, and where is it going to arrive at tax. Now, the who is really important because organizations will identify as exempts. Well, what does that necessarily mean? So in the US, the idea is an organization may identify as exempt for a myriad of different reasons. But essentially, they are going to give you a document and say, don't charge me tax because of this. And when you receive that document, the expectation is that you're maintaining these certificates. Well, you're certifying them, you're accepting them, and then you're maintaining them. So if that customer comes back, you already have that certificate on file. If you go through audit, that you make sure that you can produce these certificates, because it's very, very important that you have this physical image that's going to tie to why you did not charge tax in that transaction. And so for my European counterparts, a lot of you are used to, getting a VAT identification number. And simply recording of that number allows the marriage of those two organizations in that transaction, so you can zero rate it, and then obviously it's tied to that number. In the US, it's very important that we have the physical certificate. And the challenge is companies, how they collect it today. It might be in filing cabinets, it might be in some shared drive. Like these things can be plastered all over the place. But for you and the finance team, making sure that these are readily available and applicable as you're doing these orders. So if that's kind of the foundation about what we're talking about here today, I mentioned that there were a few different types of customers. And so I'll unpack this more on my next slide. But organizations can identify it in a lot of different ways. But essentially, I kind of put it in three buckets. So organizations can be exempt of what they're going to do with your goods, going to be exempt by who they are, or they can give you what's called a direct pay permit. And I was actually a little bit earlier. I thought I had a different slide coming up, so I will cover this more in a moment. But when we think about how you should be using these certificates, this is the category I was just talking about. So the first one is, as what they're going to do with your goods. So think like reseller, distributor, something of that sort. They're going to give you the certificate saying, I'm not consuming this thing that I'm buying from you. I am then going to turn around and sell it to somebody else further down the supply chain. Now, these can become complicated because a resale certificate may apply to everything that you are selling to them, or it may only apply to some things that you are selling to them, because maybe you're selling them some stuff that they're going to consume or use in their business, and then some of the things they buy from you, they're going to resell. So getting this certificate, making sure it's acceptable for them, but also knowing what it applies to can be kind of complicated. When we think about the other types, those are those two other buckets I was talking about. So the first one is going to be they're exempt by who they are. So this can be a government agency, local or federal. It can be a farmer with an ag certificate. But again, the ag certificate only applies to certain things and not other things. You have certain companies that are in research and development or manufacturing that by the nature of their business, they get to be exempt in some capacity in certain states. And then the final category is the idea of a direct pay. So you should be charging tax on it, but you're selling to a large organization and they're going to give you this direct pay permit saying, don't charge me tax, let me figure it out on my side. And that tends to happen when you have large companies that move your products around between their offices and they want to account for the use tax on their side. So they're asking you not to charge tax. So those are easy because you can just, put a blanket exemption on those items. So when we think about all these different types of certificates, like it's not just a customer being exempt, but it's really why they're exempt and what document ties to that reason code that is really the foundation of why this becomes pretty complex pretty quickly. Oh, so now let's talk about that. So when we think about why things are challenging, I love this first reason because it's the most prevalent one that I see out there. And it's just the lack of awareness. So I talk to manufacturing companies and say, you know what, everybody I sell to are distributors and resellers, so I don't have to worry about sales tax. That's accurate to a point. What is important is that you have exemption certificates for all of those companies that you're shipping products to. And on top of that, if you are a drop shipper, And so you are shipping products to one state. So let's say you're shipping products on, and you're going to send the bill to a company that's in Michigan, but they're asking you to ship the product to their end customer in California. Now you need to make sure that you have a California certificate on file for that Michigan company. And this idea that, hey, everything I do is exempt really becomes challenging, because you have to make sure that you have all the certificates that you need for everybody you are selling to. Because when you go through audit, the expectation in those states' eyes are that you're putting tax on everything unless there's a reason why you don't. And that reason can be the thing that I sell or the service I provide is non-taxable within the state, or it is that who I am selling to is exempt. But then you have to have that document that will hold up under scrutiny. Now, again, going back to that earlier iceberg slide idea, as you're dealing with more and more states, this becomes more and more complex. So maybe you were in one state and you understood your process, but now that you are in 10 states or 27 states, now trying to figure out what all of those states' rules are can be very, very complicated. So we work with a lot of companies that are starting to have that moment of awareness, or that epiphany moment of like, oh my goodness, I need to track certificates in all of these different states for all these customers that I'm selling to today. So very common that as companies come to aware about these changes and how it impacts them is one of the bigger challenges. And then also just maybe even finance understands that maybe sales and marketing and customer service don't really understand the importance. So even lack of awareness and educating within a company is very important. Customer management. So when we think about, the second point is kind of the biggest one here, that becomes like a billing issue. So a customer is exempt, you send something to them, so you send an invoice for it and there's sales tax on it. And so they short pay without the sales tax. We've all encountered that a million times, where all of a sudden you're trying to chase down this certificate and it's really after the fact. And so there's tax on your books, but now all of a sudden you're getting a certificate a month later, and now you're trying to go back and adjust off the tax and credit and rebill against the new certificate. And it becomes more of a billing challenge. But the fact is, that's not the customer experience that you want between you and that business. And so it becomes kind of like this burden process. Like nobody's excited to go through this process, the thing we have to deal with. And it tends to take longer and longer and longer to try and get these, which just kind of strains that overall relationship. And on top of that, if you're allowing your frontline folks to be able to get those certificates up front, everything else will get smoother downstream. But the longer you wait, the more challenging it is to try and get those certificates. And so I would absolutely posit that document management absolutely affects customer relationships and customer management. Now, with that being said, as I kind of alluded to a moment ago, internal management. So when we think about individuals within your company, it gets hard to try and get these certificates. So again, is it a salesperson that's getting it up front? Do you have an account manager that's working with the relationship? Is it your finance folks? Is it your credit team? Like who's responsible to get these certificates? And then it becomes pretty hard trying to get them from the customer, because again, it may not be their top priority. But then what do you do when you get it? And so as I mentioned earlier, these states can have 20, 30, 40 different forms. So how do you know what to look for on that form? And so every form is going to have unique boxes that have to be checked, or date fields or title fields. And so trying to ramp up your employees on all of the knowledge they need to evaluate and approve or disapprove these certificates is pretty intense. Again, retrieval, it's time consuming, it's hard. Nobody really enjoys doing it. And when we think about a certificate, I've always loved this idea of like, it's not just a piece of paper, but it is money. Because when you think about all the sales that you're making against that certificate that you're not charging tax, that if you go under audit or you don't have that certificate and you chose not to charge tax, all of a sudden that can become a huge burden for your company. And it's not just the tax, but now you have penalty and interest and other things that start coming into play. So these single pieces of paper, especially for companies that sell a lot to exempt organizations, carry a lot of financial weight, but also a lot of exposure for a company. And so, yeah, they're challenging. All right, so Ashley, you know what? I've been talking so long, I kind of feel like it might be time for another question.
Yeah, let's give you a water break. All right, so we have our second CPE question. We'll give you all 60 seconds to answer this. So just a reminder, if you want CPE credit for this session today, please take a moment to respond. The poll question is, how many employees does your company have? With 4 ranges there to choose from. And this just helps us gauge our audience so we can know, like, are we talking to small business, larger business, and tailor a message a little more towards you. So take a moment to answer that, and I will advance this slide.
So while the company size actually helps us understand kind of who they are, what they're operating with, I would kind of raise the idea that when it comes to certificates, I mean, you can be a two-person company and have a ton of pain around this, and you can be a 10,000 employee company with very little pain about it. So when we think about exemption certificates, it very much ties to what you sell, who your customer base is, and in what markets, and especially if you have expanding nexus, that alone can constitute a huge pain around certificates. So if this becomes a large pain and I'm dealing with a lot of different states, are there ways that, I can be helped? And so let's talk a little bit about the SST program. So the SST is something I've been talking about for 15 years. And when I started talking about it, it had already been around for, 7 years. So I think it initially started about 21 years or so ago. And so with the launch of the SST program, the idea was that they wanted Congress to regulate interstate trade and say, anybody selling cross state lines needs to start charging tax. And the overall understanding was that state tax rules were so different about how things were being taxed or how the documents were being applied, that there had to be some uniformity between states. And so states started lining up their rules around how they tax things. And that was really the SST movement, was states starting to change their sourcing to destination-based sourcing, how I define and tax products. And there was lots of effort around this. So the SST movement went forward. There were things like the Main Street Fairness Act and the Marketplace Fairness Act that never really made it too far down the path to being put into law. And because it didn't, all of a sudden the states start taking it on their own shoulders. And that was the birth of economic nexus, where now states have their own definitions about when you need to register and start collecting their tax. Now, I mention this because the SST program still exists today. And so even as we have economic nexus, the SST program still exists. And in fact, you have quite a few states. And so on this map, all of those states that are in like a turquoisey green color are part of the SST program. And so what that means is if you have to register in these states as part of economic nexus, again, you don't have people, place, or things in these states, you may very well qualify as a voluntary seller. And basically what that means is the states will actually pay Avalara as a certified service provider to perform the tax determination and remittance for you. And so in these states, you need to make sure that you have Avalara plugged in, but we can actually perform the determination and also returns free of charge for you because the states pay us. But one of the biggest things around this is they need to make sure, and the reason they're doing that is that we're going to get the tax correct for them. Now, as part of that, that means that we're going to look at the who and the who, what, and where and have the proper document and apply it all in real time. So realize that to become part of the SST, you really need to maintain the certificates in an automated solution, make sure they're applied appropriately. And that's really the benefit in the state's eyes, is that everything will be tracked, easy to see, but also applied properly all in real time. So they get the tax money that they are owed. So great program. So if you're dealing with more and more states, it's not a new program, but with the overlay of economic nexus, it's a very relevant program right now. In fact, we're working with more companies at SST now than we have in the past 20 years. All right, so with that being said, maybe you're coming to a better understanding about certificates or the challenges or hurdles, or maybe these were things you already really understood. But let's kind of think about management. So kind of how I maintain these certificates and what that process looks and feels like. So when we think about, in general, a management tool, the idea is you need to collect these from the customers, store them, be able to identify and track them, report off of them as needed, analyze them so as things are changing or expiring that you can get new certificates, and of course utilize. Now, if I was drawing this, I'd probably move utilize over to between store and track, because the idea is that once I get this information, I need to have it, but I need to make sure it's applied in real time. And so what I mean by that is if the customer comes to my website, if they walk into a store, if I'm placing an order, I'm doing my ERP, if I'm quoting out of my CRM, like a Salesforce, like I need to make sure that this thing is being utilized and applied anywhere I may interact with this customer. When we think about an automated tool, this first bullet around the shifting the onus from the seller to buyer is important. And the idea is that through technology, you're enabling your buyer to present that back to you so you can easily ask, but it's not this trying to chase them down to get a PDF or a JPEG of it. It just becomes far easier. And easier means you get it quicker and you get it more appropriate for your process. Again, when you have a tool, you have to ensure, or it eases the need for tax expertise. As I mentioned, going from 5 states to 27, you don't have to become an expert in certificate management in 22 more states as you're ramping up. Obviously, everything should be in the cloud. Now, every company has little like taglines, and this is actually one of my favorite ones Avalara's made in a while, but this idea of paper to pixels. So paper, traditionally, you have these, maybe you have requests from customers. It might not be a true paper copy, but maybe it's a PDF of it. But the idea is that it's living as a static file somewhere that you have to go access and pull out, or it might very well still be printed copies in file cabinets that you have to reference and, you know, maybe tag it in your ERP of, hey, they're exempt, but then the actual certificate and the information around that lives somewhere else. And the idea of bringing that automated, you're bringing that information into a tool that is part of the real-time determination as you are figuring out tax for your different process. B2B online sales. Oh man, I goodness, I love this. So sitting across so many different opportunities, so many different customers over so many years, I get to see certain trends of things that are happening. And one of the things that I've seen a great deal as we've kind of in the past year, year and a half, is companies reevaluating technology and how it can enable certain parts of their business. And the thing that we're seeing a lot right now is beyond having a website for B2C, there's a strong push toward, you know, customer portals or automating the way in which companies can submit orders to you. And so not a B2C site, but really a B2B site that allows more functionality for them, but certainly document management being part of that is always part of that dialogue, because if I don't have to have them call in or email an individual, if they can do it through the portal, that's really a best state for them. So lots of things you want to think about how you engage with your customers, and especially on the portal side of it. But at the end of the day, it just improves the overall experience on their side as a much more fluid, easy to use selling process, and also certainly makes things easier on your side as well. All right, so what is ECM? So there's a lot of words on this slide, so let me kind of unpack this for us. So Avalara has done document management since our inception. And we had a tool that a lot of you may know called Cert Capture. And so this is the industry best solution, manage, just shy of 30 million certificates in this tool today. But as you may know, it was a separate solution that you would log in to gain access to Cert Capture outside of AvaTax. We have now brought that user interface and that functionality into AvaTax. And so it's now called ECM, and typically ECM Pro. And that is essentially the user interface on all the same content and functionality that was within Cert Capture, but it's now within AvaTax. So one solution, one login, access to all of your information. But as we change that user interface, it gives a chance to do some really neat things that we wanted to accomplish. So on that first bullet, we simplified it. It's now the driving factor as we were building it was make it easy to use, make it intuitive, but still keep it very powerful. There's also things we've done around expanding functionality. So we have some AI-powered automation of certificate review. So there's some neat things we've done, especially around OCR, so optical character recognition, I believe it stands for. But essentially, a customer can upload a certificate, and we can start scraping information off of that, so you don't have to key things in. So there's some really cutting-edge information that we're doing there. But when we think about how you interact with your customers, it's quite often done within the CRM or within the ERP. So we have over 35 of our connectors have embedded functionality for this document management for either pushing up customer information to our system, requesting certificates, or also seeing that certificate information back in your ERP. And there's some really nice functionality that we include kind of out of the box with some of our ERP integrations. As I mentioned earlier, it lives and breathes within AvaTax. So, and I'll bring this to life in some more slides later, but when we think about how I'm determining tax, as I said in the beginning, we're looking at the who, what, and where. So if you have a certificate on file, AvaTax will always check that customer saying, do I have a certificate on file? Does it apply for the ship to location? Does it apply on this date of invoicing? And then exempt that sale accordingly. So extremely deep integration as you're actually determining tax across all your platforms. And then one of the things that our customers were asking for was automated notifications out to customers about expiring certificates. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, some of these certificates don't expire. Others do expire at different intervals. And so they might be good for 24 months or 36 months from issuance. Others, like a Florida, are good for a calendar year. So, as we're talking here toward the end of the year, a lot of you will be thinking about getting your all new Florida certificates here in January. But this idea that the system can identify which ones will be expiring, but also in automated fashion, reach out to them to get that certificate information. So some really nice functionality that we've added to ECM. But essentially, just for those of you who know cert capture, ECM is just the new user interface in AvaTax, but still the power of cert capture behind it. So when we think about how to get certificates, there's just different ways you need to interact with your customers to get these certificates. And I love these 5, icons that are on the screen here. So number one, when I think about a customer coming to my shopping cart and buying something online, what if they're exempt? How do I get that certificate from the individual who's looking to buy online? And so historically, maybe they place the order, there's tax on it, there's a note, hey, call customer service, then they're trying to get you the certificate through there. And then you're trying to get it and apply it before the order is realized and shipped out and card charged. And it's just not really the customer experience that most individuals are thinking about or wanting for their customers. Worst case scenario, that customer sees that, doesn't want to go through the process, so they abandon their cart and they go to a different website to buy a similar product. Now, I mentioned earlier about the web portal. That's really more of a focus around kind of that B2B I was talking about. So outside of an individual shopping cart interaction, but now it's kind of more of a how I want my customer to interact with me and place orders, see bills, approve bills, what have you. Some nice things around the web portal on the B2B side. What happens when somebody walks into a store and they say, I'm exempt? They put a piece of paper in front of a clerk who's looking to bring them up. What does that clerk do? Or how do they interact with that? So we have some really neat functionality. So if they have a web-enabled device, we have an app. So you can basically take a picture. Like maybe you've done that with a bank where you're depositing a check. And so you take a picture of the check and that's how you upload it to the bank. We have a very similar idea around exemption certificates. You can take an image and it uploads in the tool where corporate you can approve and put on file. But it's very easy, intuitive for that clerk to get that information without them becoming an expert on a certificate. What should be on it is they can just image it, upload it, and then it's all part of that same database. Mail, email, phone, ways you can interact with them. You can send emails out to customers for them to submit the information. I will say it's pretty nice that when you send that email out to a company, there's an embedded link that when they click it, will actually open up a dedicated portal for them where they can see what certificates they have on file, which ones are missing. They can renew certificates. It's an easy way for them to interact with the documents that you're maintaining for your customer base. Last piece of it, the tablet, the Salesforce, that's going to kind of echo what I was doing with the point of sale side of it, but essentially taking images, but also being able to query in real time and say, as a customer, do you have a certificate on file? If not, taking an image or digitally creating one on the iPad or on the device itself. So essentially, we're really trying to, in that paper to pixels effort, the idea of how can I interact with certificates in a more digital way is something that Avalara has focused a lot of time and energy around. Because at the end of the day, it's all about you having a certificate. The easier you can get it up front and easier adoption with less training for everybody, means it'll be a higher level adoption. And that's definitely been a focus for us. All right, so how we are different for Avalara. So the collection done your way. Again, I echoed a lot of these things over those past 5 icons, but you can kind of decide which piece of those technology makes sense for your business. Maybe I was talking through those and you said, those 3 are perfect for me and those 2 don't apply to me at all. Like there's a lot of flexibility in how you can deploy it, but there's also different ways in which you can approve and what's acceptable in your eyes for certificates. And there's a lot of flexibility in how you capture these certificates. But at the end of the day, it's really about getting that paper to pixels. Now, as far as existing, so what happens when you are a new customer to AvaTax, the ECM platform, but you already have a bunch of certificates. And so what do I do with these? And so it can very easily digitize if they are paper, or again, if they are a digital individual files, aggregating them and loading them into the tool is a pretty easy to do process. And then of course is the approval process that goes with it. And then the staying in touch is just really making sure that you can interact with a customer, again, through that portal, through the email, but you're making it very easy for them to see what they have, see what's missing, and create that new certificate. Now, I will mention if I was doing a live demo of that portal, if I was a customer and I was creating a new certificate because you asked it from me, it takes about 30 seconds. It's a few screens, basic information. I'm digitally signing the screen. It's a pretty smooth process for them. but for you, you get the correct form, everything's on it, and also it's a nice, clean, readable copy of that certificate. All right, so how does it work with AvaTax? So when we think about ECM, and I've been talking a lot about this platform, this idea of paper to pixels, and I alluded to this idea of AvaTax and it being a seamless process. But as we think about kind of how the technologies work and interplay, AvaTax is going to be tied into your ERP, e-com, point of sale, CRM, whatever technology it is that you are creating orders, invoicing, quoting out of. But again, within AvaTax, I need to check in real time and say, for this order, who am I selling to? What am I selling? Where is it going to? And it will always check ECM for those certificates. And so once that image is on file with relevant information, it's going to apply automatically anytime a system is calling into AvaTax. And of course, all of this will report appropriately and naturally flow onto the returns and other products that you have with Avalara. So here you go. This is a great image. So a lot of you, I'm sure, are comfortable or aware of this, but realize that within AvaTax, on every single line of every single invoice, there's kind of a logic that we go through. And so you'll see at the top, tax code, entity use code, addresses, but essentially that's going to lead this idea of, are you collecting tax in this state? Is this customer taxable? And then is this product or service taxable? It's that second box, and that's us checking, saying, for this item, for this customer, for this location, does the certificate apply? And then if it does, that becomes no, and then we're going to exempt those orders accordingly. So again, once it's on file, it just works with AvaTax for you. Cert Express. So Cert Express is kind of that tool I was talking about, that portal, or that ability to look at these. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, we have over 1,000 unique and state-specific certificates. That is a lot of certificates just for the US. So making sure that as they're completing these forms, we're having the right information populated in the right place in the right manner on those 1,000 different forms. So you don't have to become an expert on 1,000 different forms. It's a really easy and intuitive tool that, again, changes that customer experience and how you capture and garner those certificates. All right, so benefits. So I get that the technology works this way. So what's the benefit for me as a company to start automating this? So going on that B2B portal idea, it's a centralized location for all exemption certificates. And so now, like here, let's say this is my website for my portal. You'll see on the left-hand side under customer account, I can now have an exemption certificate tab. You'll see in the middle here, it kind of calls out, hey, I have one that's good. I have another one that's expired. I don't know if you can see it. That little box all the way to the right past the red box of expired says renew. So outside of me placing an order, I can actually just renew and maintain those certificates directly from my website, my portal. And then they can also click on view and it will actually show them the physical certificates that you have on file. So again, it's bringing all the document management and the technology into your technology to make it easy to interact with your customers. Now, oh, there you go. There's my talking bullet slide. So now let's think about that first icon I had up there. And that was the idea of a website. So what happens when somebody comes into your website and they're exempt? So you'll see below the $31 of tax, there's a whole line saying, hey, is this purchase tax exempt? So as they click that box, if they are exempt, it's actually going to open up a portal. Now keep in mind, this is going to be in your shopping cart experience. It's not redirecting out to a different website. I don't know about you, but for me, if I get redirected to a different website, I tend to just shut down those windows. I don't like being redirected. So this is a pop-up that's going to show within your cart where they can create that certificate as part of the checkout process. So again, engaging the customer where they are when they're ready to present that information. All right, as far as now I was talking a little bit about that in-store, kind of that last icon I had up there, and the idea that I can actually easily search and say, hey, for this customer number, what do I have on file? And then if I don't have it on file, either taking an image or allowing them to digitally create that certificate on the tablet or on the interface. Now, I think it's important to take a moment and pause here because not all point of sale systems have integrations into a tax engine. Many times those point of sale systems are, running an unconnected manner. So many times there's gonna be like a tax exempt button on that register that you're gonna click. So you can very much use this as a standalone document management tool to make sure you get the right certificate, check to see if there's one on file. If not, create a new one. And then once I have that on file, then the clerk can go around and push that exempt button. And it was very much meant to be intuitive and easy, again, for STIR clerks to use and not need a lot of training in order to utilize before they hit that tax exempt button. All right, so everything I've talked about so far has been technology. And so it's really common that people come to me and say, I get it, but there's still a lot of human effort that goes into this, especially if I have 1,000 or 5,000 certificates today and me having to like upload those. But ideally, I just don't want to upload it. I want to clean it up and make sure that before I do upload, that it's going to be a nice clean copy of that certificate. So know that the vast majority of our customers also engage our managed services practice. So this is a large group that just lives and breathes documents all day long. And so they can take your certificates and start that paper to pixels process. They're subject matter experts in this, and so they know what to look for. They know the nuances. The nuances are like the gotchas for different states. And again, this allows you to spend your time on things that are more important to your business versus data entry of certificates and kind of cleaning it. Now, there's two different ways that you can engage with us. So the managed service, well, there's many ways, but the two most common ways are kind of an upfront project. So that one-time kind of legacy addition. So like what you have today, you're going to bring into ECM and allow it to be maintained. And when you do, you want to clean up the certificates, check the IDs, fill in any gaps. So do campaigns to collect any certificates that you might be missing or might be expired. And there's lots of different rules around how things are being maintained and validated, but there's also the ongoing. So beyond that one time up front, what do I do as I get new certificates, or do I want to do these campaigns and reach out to multiple customers once I've already been live on ECM? And so that's kind of the second category. So many times managed services is an upfront project and also a long-term or just an upfront, but we really common that they engage our people to go with the technology as well. All right, Ashley, I've been talking a long time. I think it's time for another poll question.
All right. For our third CPE question, we have, what is a top challenge for you or your company? So broadly speaking, what's top of mind challenge-wise? Is it finding or retaining staff? Is it navigating the economic or political uncertainty? There's a lot of concerns about recession and inflation recently. Is it changing regulations and trying to stay on top of that? Is it managing technology or tools? Maybe not necessarily your sales tax, but your entire technology ecosystem. Is that a challenge for you, or is something else top of mind for you? So I'll give you a second to answer that. And as a reminder, those looking to receive CPE credit need to respond to 3 of these 4 poll questions. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. So yeah, or an option F, like all of the above. So the reason we chose those is what we're hearing every day from our customers. But really the idea was the one that's most pressing right now in your mind. Now, in the very beginning, I brought up the idea that I would have a demo, but really the demo is going to just be some simple screenshots for us. So when we think about the ECM solution, so this is just a screenshot of AvaTax. A lot of you already know that, as you look at your home screen, then you have your transactions, and many of you do the returns. But between those transaction returns is your exemptions tab. And so as you expand that, all the power and functionality that used to live within CertCapture now just lives within this tab. And so if you were to click on the overview, it'll take you down as kind of a simple, here's the common things that you're seeing. And again, I know it's small on your screens, but like those tasks are, expiring certificates, incoming certificates to review, like those common activities that you're going to do within the tool. On the right-hand side, it's an easy insight. So here I'm expecting to have about 1,200 certificates. I have about 400 today. In the yellow, I have a bunch that are coming through I haven't approved yet. And in the white, I'm still missing a bunch. And so it gives you that easy, quick snapshot. Now, before I go to the next slide and some more functionality, I think it's really important for me to call out that resources in the bottom left-hand side of this slide. So we've always had the technology and kind of automating your tax policy. But when it comes to certificates, so many companies just had questions of, can I accept this certificate for this state, especially like in drop shipping? Like, does Oklahoma allow me to accept a Texas certificate? What can I do? Hey, a customer gave me this form. Is it the right kind of form? Like, there's lots of questions around certificates. So that Avalara answers on the left-hand side is a lot of information specific to document management. And so beyond the tool, it's a great place to go just for that knowledge around these tools, what you can accept, and some of those nuances as well. But getting back into technology. So here you'll see one of the tabs in the very top. So that was an overview. One below is now I've sent the email out and I've got the certificate. And as I mentioned in the beginning, somebody in your company needs to look at it and accept that certificate. So this is what that acceptance process would look like. And so here I have a certificate that got submitted from Florida. Yep, it's that time of year to get the new ones from Florida. And so I can look at this. I can validate the number they submitted directly with Florida. In the middle, again, I know it's small, but in the middle is a little tiny checkbox next to the tax ID. So as that number gets keyed in, you can push the checkbox and it'll actually certify with the state of Florida to make sure it all checks out. You can take the certificate, make it a single use or like a blanket. So it's going to be used just one time or multiple times. And there's lots of information that you can attach to the certificate. But basically, once you hit that blue box in the bottom left, the save box, it's on file. And now you can actually quote invoice against it, and it will automatically apply across those different technologies that you already have AvaTax plugged into. So know that once they do submit it, there's still an approval process because we want to make sure that somebody looks at it and says, this makes sense for me to accept for my company before you put it on file. Now, once these certificates are on file, you may also need to pull the information out. I actually just had a call yesterday where they were talking about an audit and how the real pain for them, because they're mostly exempt sales, was trying to find all these different certificates to try and tie in the different transactions. And it was an extreme pain. In fact, I think she was saying it was like 3 weeks for her to pull all the certificates. And so I was showing this tool. I was like, look, you can actually just do, you know, here's my state, here's my look back period. And in 30 seconds, you can like pull the reports. And I literally got like a wow from the CFO when we were talking through it. So when we think about certificates, being able to pull the information out easily and produce it either for an auditor or just for internal reference, extremely easy to use these tools to query, find, and kind of see what's on file, and then produce reports off of that. All right. So you told me in the beginning, Ashley, that we would have 4 different questions. We got through 3. Is this the 4th one?
This is the 4th and final poll question. So take a moment, answer, what would you like to see more of in 2023? You can select all that apply. This will really help us, see what you find valuable so we can build events for our customers. So are you interested in more hands-on trainings, in-person regional events where you bring your laptop, we help you with hands-on training, product updates and demos? Are you interested in thought leadership with CPE credit? Are you interested in hearing from customers with customer presenters, customer panels? Or are you interested in something else? And in our post-event survey, if there's something else you're interested in, definitely let us know. There's an open text box. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Ashley, I've been doing events for our customers for about 9 years now. And every year it just kind of evolves and what they want to hear or talk about or how they want to engage with the information. So know that we listen. So I know it's a checkbox for you, but we very much take that information. And we are currently curating and building all of our content for you for next year. So letting us know what you want really helps us figure out what you want us to build for you. And then we'll go do that. So with that, Ashley, I think this is my last slide. And I think there's always questions that come up. And I think we have, a few more minutes here. So are there a couple questions that came in that might be good ones to kind of walk through for the group today?
Yes, let's get to some of those questions. So first up, we have, you talked about the SST program. Why are exemption certificates so important to be part of it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I get this kind of question a lot. So the idea is, okay, so if I want to be part of the SST program, in fact, this actually came up this morning. If I'm a part of this SST program, why do I have to store my certificate with you? Can't I just tell you it's an exempt customer? Obviously, it's Walmart. Obviously, they're going to resell it. So why do I have to put the certificate on file with you? So the idea of the SST, and it's very codified, that they don't want decisions being made outside of a tax engine. The reason they are paying Avalara to get the tax correct for you, which is why you get the free services, that we are making that full decision. We have all the logic. It's been certified by the states. And the idea is that in real time, I'm going to check saying, for this customer, do I have a certificate that is acceptable in the state's eyes, that is applicable for this product being shipped to, and is also accepted at the date of this product being shipped out? So they don't want you simply telling them, exempt it. I know it's Walmart, it's good enough. Like in the state's eyes, they want to make sure they can come in and actually see the certificate and have it directly tied to that transaction. And this comes up quite often as companies look to be part of the SST, that they want to think through, well, how do I get my certificates in? How do I start applying them? Because it's extremely important in the SST's eyes that we're the ones maintaining it in the system, that you're not simply telling us to exempt it, but that we've done our diligence and that certificate will hold up under that state's review. Oh, and I guess one thing I forgot to mention too, Ashley, I've been talking about SST forever, But one of the nice things is when we talk about, if you're part of the program, first line of audit response. And so if they come to audit you, they're coming to us first for tax before they come to you. And so when they come to Avalara and say, I need to audit company ABC for this period, they know what reports they want from us. They know what information. So we just extract the information they want, and they know exactly what they're looking to see. And so they're looking for any kind of gaps in that process. And so that's part of why we need to have the certificate, is to make sure it's going to hold the file they want. But secondary benefit for you is we're also become that first line of audit support for you. So they come to us before they come talking to you.
Got it.
Is that it? We had one question, Ashley? That's it for this group, or are there more?
Oh, there's more for sure.
Okay.
Let's see. I've heard about one form that can be used for more than one state. Is that true?
Oh, so I didn't say it, but on a very early slide, there was a picture of it. It was like slide number 4 or 5. So let's think about this in one of two ways. I think I kind of know what they're looking to ask. And that was my phone timer telling me it's time for Q&A. So I think we're right on schedule, Ashley. So the first one is what's called a multi-jurisdictional form. And so the idea is that there can be one form that's presented to you, and in the middle of the form, there's a bunch of different states. And so they can actually put the state in there with the actual numbers. And so you might have a customer that gives you one form and be like, this covers me for 10 states or 14 states or what have you. And that's a very real thing. And so the idea is that you can take that one form, put it on file, and then within a tool like ECM, you take that one certificate and say, hey, it applies to these 14 states. You can certify the number for those 14 states. And then when you save it, we'll make 14 copies of it or 13 more copies of it. And we'll put one form of that under each state where it needs to be, so that when you run a query and you run a report on, it'll be extracted with each of those reports for the appropriate states. So yes, absolutely, it's a real thing. It's called a multi-jurisdiction form or a multi-J form. Now, secondarily, there's also this idea, and I alluded to it earlier, but I'll talk a little bit more now because we're in Q&A, of, I'm selling, I have a customer, it's a drop shipper, and they're in Oklahoma, and they're asking me to ship my product to Texas. And they're going to give me that Oklahoma resale certificate saying, don't charge me tax in Texas. Now, the first response is, well, I need a Texas form from you. But the fact is, there's actually a lot of states for drop shippers that have very unique rules in what they will accept. They will accept some states' certificates and not other states. And it becomes this really complicated thing where you're trying to figure out, well, they're telling me I should accept this, but I don't know if I can or can't, which is kind of going back to the idea of that library of those tax answers. So number one, you might get a multi-jurisdiction form, or number two, you might get one form for the state they're in, and they're going to tell you, hey, go use this for 5 other states or 6 other states. And you may think, can I? is that acceptable in the state or not? But if in your eyes it is acceptable in the state, you could very easily, again, kind of same multi-jurisdiction form, add multiple states that one certificate, and then we'll store it appropriately in all those states. So yeah, it's a real thing.
Got it. Awesome. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So next up we have, what do the states expect from me to verify on a form when a customer gives it to me?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. Surprised I didn't cover that earlier. Okay, so the idea is customer gives you a form. What do you have to do before you put that on file? So even if we talk about like the paper and pixels idea, but like even just paper today, like not using a tool, but just what do you have to do? And the fact of the matter is, same thing with sales tax, every state's different in what they accept. So some will actually expect you to, there's different degrees of kind of good faith acceptance about, hey, they gave it to me, I'm good. Some states are going to expect you to kind of check the structure of the number they present to you, but about half the states actually expect you to digitally certify that number with the state before you put it on file. So they want you to take that next step to make sure it all checks out with the state. But in the state's eyes, as is pretty common, like when it comes time for audit, they're going to review everything on that certificate and expect, as I mentioned, like every box is checked that needs to be checked, the date field or title field is on there. Like these things that kind of seem inconsequential under audit, they will very much review for any missing information. So the onus really becomes on you when you get that. You need to make sure everything's on that form so that when somebody looks at it later, a year or 2 from now, it's going to hold up then for them. And then also checking those numbers. Now, with that being said, things also do change as far as addresses. And so making sure that when you bring it on file, it matches and marries to the company. I'll just say that. because the other one's gonna be a long story about M&A and everything else. So making sure that everything checks out up front.
Perfect. All right, I think one more question, which is, do I need to come back and review certificates if they don't expire?
Okay, so I swear that wasn't scripted. Okay, so that's actually the part I wasn't going to go into, but I guess I will go into. So you get a certificate from a company, and then what happens when changes on that company? So in the world we live in now, merger and acquisitions happening left and right. I continually see companies rebranding, retitling, restructuring, moving offices. So realize that when that certificate is given to you, it's kind of declared from this company to this company. But what happens when that company changes? And I think kind of the root of the question they're probably asking here, Ashley, is it's one thing for Florida. If they expire every year, I get a new one every year. I'm not worried about that. But there's a lot of certificates that don't expire. So when I get a certificate and I put it in there, I mean, I could still be selling against it 10 years from now. And theoretically, it's still valid. How often do I go back and check this? And it's really common that companies will go back every 5 years or so and kind of review all those certificates. Why? Because if that company is listed, what if they change names? What if the addresses change? Like if there's things that are on that certificate that aren't current, that's going to have a severe impact in how that certificate is reviewed. And so going back through and checking them, even though theoretically they don't expire, going through and kind of curating that information on a regular basis is highly recommended, because what you don't want to have happen is you go under audit and they find a certificate and say, this one's not good. You missed something on this one, or this company, changed hands 3 years ago. And so you're exposed for tax for 3 years. And then you go back to the company saying, well, can I get a new certificate? But the company you're asking from, it doesn't exist anymore. So either they got acquired, the people aren't there anymore. So all of a sudden you turn around and say, I need a new one because this one expired. And the people you have to ask aren't even there anymore. And all of a sudden you as a company are on the hook for those 3 years of tax liability. So with how much things are changing right now, I highly recommend that companies kind of set a cadence to go back in and review this information, even if they don't expire, just because the companies that are buying from you are changing really quickly right now. And it's in your best interest to make sure you're protecting yourself through this process. So I think we're about time, Ashley, but I think that's actually a really good point to end on. So yeah, hopefully this was a good use of your time. And I know I talked a lot, so hopefully you found some value.
Yes. Thank you, Jeffrey, for your time today. This was a great presentation, and thanks for answering some of these audience questions. And we also had some people on the back end answering questions throughout the presentations and the chat. So thanks to them for their time as well. And I just have a couple of slides to close out. So for those who qualified for CPE, you can download your certificate now in the Earn Certification box or in the post-event email that you'll receive in 24 hours. In the post-event email, you'll also receive a link back to this console, so you can review the on-demand recording, you can download the slide deck, you can look at the additional resources again. We also have a lot of webinars scheduled through the end of the year. So if you see a topic that interests you, or if you're looking for more CPE credit, be sure to check out avalara.com/webinars to register for those. Thank you for attending today, and this concludes our webinar.
Thank you all.